Hi everyone, my name is Peter Wapples Crow. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander project worker at Thorn Harbour Health. We've been hosting online events of yarns, and today we're going to have a yarn about the Australian Queer Archives with Angela Bailey. But before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and future. I also would like to extend that out to all the countries that we find ourselves on, and to all the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander viewers that might be watching this today. I'd also like to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So today we're going to be yarning with Angela Bailey from the Australian Queer Archives. And maybe I'll just get Angela to introduce herself. Yeah. How are you today, Angela, anyway?
Good, Peter. Thank you. Thanks for having me on your yarn session. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm zooming in from the lands of Wurundjeri of the Kulin Nations and pay respects to elders past and present, and to all First Nations people across this land. I'm zooming in from front room of my house. Couple of artworks in the background there, one by Trevor Turbo Brown screen print, and a couple of other posters in the room. So yeah, excited to be here. I am president of the Australian Queer Archives and have been for a few years now. I am also work as a curator and a photographer with numerous exhibitions across the various galleries and museums of Melbourne, and also up in Queensland where I'm from. So yeah, excited to be here with you today, Peter.
Well, welcome, Angela. I'm excited to have you here. And we've worked on exhibitions together as artists and even in an archive sense. So I guess I was just interested to have a chat about the archives. I should say I'm Ngarigu, which is from the high country of New South Wales as well, my mob. But I've been living here on Kulin Nation for quite a few years now, and it's been very kind to me, so I cherish that as well. All right, we'll take a dive into the Australian Queer Archives. What are the Queer Archives, Angela? And could you share a bit of history about them?
Sure. So they started as a collecting organisation. They started in about 1978, which was around the time very much of gay lib in Australia, gay liberation. So it was a few dedicated activists from that time who saw the need to collect some of that material that was being made to promote gay liberation, and they saw that nobody else in the mainstream galleries or museums was doing that. So they set about working towards creating an archive of sorts. So it started off as the Gay Archives. It then morphed into the Gay and Lesbian Archives, the Lesbian and Gay Archives, and then the Australian Lesbian Gay Archives, and where we are now as of last year, which is the Australian Queer Archives, which we think better represents all the communities of our LGBTIQ plus peoples. So it started off quite small, a filing cabinet in someone's house, underneath someone's house. It moved to various other organisations. It was kindly hosted by Thorn Harbour Health, Victorian AIDS Council back then at South Yarra, and then at the Cancer Council building. So and now we're about to start a new chapter being at the Victorian Pride Centre. So, and it has, of course, grown from just a few items and ephemera to a collection that encompasses, the whole sort of spectrum of queer life as such. And it's a fantastic collection in terms of documenting, and it is of quite significance too, in terms of what it holds. Yeah, so that's a little deep dive into it.
It is a deep dive. I was going to ask, maybe we'll expand on it a bit as we go along as well.
Yeah.
So you sort of talked about how the collection come about as, a response to, gay liberation and people thinking that we should collect it, and that the mainstream probably weren't collecting this sort of stuff at the time. And you've talked a bit about what materials do you collect, you know, what in general, you know?
Yeah. So we were very much initially quite paper-based. So, you know, minutes of committee meetings and personal papers and letters of correspondence. And back then, before we were obviously in the world of digitization, we had paper clippings and you know, tape cassettes and VHS cassettes and all those things sort of documenting queer life. And as we've expanded, we now collect so much more objects, posters, textiles, T-shirts, you know, drag outfits, newspapers, periodicals, books, photographs, obviously badges, even now face masks from the pandemic that have got that queer edge to them. So a lot of we collected so much during the marriage equality campaign. Not just the yes stuff, but we also were sent by a few dedicated supporters, you know, hideous things they'd got in the mail by people supporting the no vote. And we thought, well, even though it's, you know, not great to read it and things like that, or to view it, but we thought it was still also important to document that discrimination and bitterness that was evident during that time to queer people.
Yeah, so you take it's not all one-sided actually. So you see
it just gives that whole sort of spectrum. I mean, and you see that from the very early records. So we've got like the very early records of phone log books of like the early sort of switchboard where people would ring in and ask for support or things around harassment by police or authorities. And, you know, you can just, it's all there, quite clear, just that sort of that edge of violence and discrimination that queer people were subjected to.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I've noticed, you know, I'm an older fella now, and I've noticed changes in my time. So I'm sure the archive reflects that as well.
That's right.
You know, and it's gotten with the times by changing, you know, its name to queer to better reflect the community. So
that's right.
I guess you've already answered this. And why is this material really important to the LGBTI community plus? Community?
I think when I think about that, I think about you know, how the collection is used and how it's accessed, and I think that it's important that we've got that documentation and those stories for the younger generations and the future generations, in terms of, you know, we are the most significant collection in Australia of LGBTIQ life. And it's only in the most recent years that the mainstream collections and galleries and museums have started collecting material related to the queer communities. And so, you know, we get school groups in, we get the Midsummer Futures group in of visual artists, so we get tertiary students in, all eager to learn those histories and just see how they sort of fit in, and see the people that came before them and look for the similarities in their life and those lives, and also to learn about that, what those earlier generations had to do to live the lives that we live now. So, you know, researchers and academics and, you know, artists and all sorts come and access the collection. So, yeah, I think it's really important for a collection to be an active collection. You know, you don't want it to be static, so that it's got that community connection, which essentially the archives is. It's a community archive.
Okay. As an Aboriginal person, I'm interested to know what the collection holds in terms of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander LGBTIQ SGBB plus histories. So,
So look, we've got a growing collection. thinking back over the history of this archive, it was started by a group of, predominantly white, gay, cis men of that 70s era. So, a lot of the material is reflected from those lives. So it's been in the last, as we keep moving forward, that we're able to sort of then look at, we need all the histories, we need all these narratives of our histories, not just the one history. So in terms of Indigenous content in the collection, we've got a lot of photographs from various campaigns or protests, or like Pride March or First Nations float at Mardi Gras, and a few key players within the Indigenous community. Like we've got some early photographs of Noel Tovey and his career, I guess. And Noel's a great supporter of the archives. I have regular email correspondence with him. And he also contributed a few ideas about places that were significant to him in terms of our recent Victorian heritage project of the 100 places of significance and objects to LGBTIQ plus peoples in Victoria. So we've also got a very fantastic collection of posters that relate to the AIDS and the various campaigns that health organisations and Indigenous organisations did to combat and create awareness about education in that space. So you can see the whole gamut there of the imagery that's used to connect with queer Indigenous communities and also Indigenous communities about AIDS. We've also got posters and some material around to do with Out Black, who had fantastic events across Melbourne, and various badges, of course the Phantom in relation to Condo Man and things like that. So yeah, we've got a big gamut, but I feel like we've got more to do in that space in terms of engaging with the queer community, in terms of I think whenever you're asking someone to share their story with the collection and archive, you've got to be able to make sure that relationship is a safe, secure one as well, and really engages. So I think we've got a bit more to do in that space as well.
Well, it's great you've got Uncle Noel, Uncle Noel Tuvey.
Yeah.
And supporting you as an elder, like as one of our elders, and that's really important. And I guess I was, you sent me a link to a lot of the documents, and I thought about, images of people who might have been deceased, as well.
Yeah.
We should warn people that
that's
some
right.
of the images might be of deceased Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
Yeah.
And, I'm someone who's worked in the HIV field. So a lot of these posters are really familiar to me, and they really took me back to the time there was an amazing, health promotion response from the Aboriginal community. I know one of the contact tracers here in Victoria always speaks really highly of how the Victorian Aboriginal community really engaged early and wanted to know everything about HIV and AIDS, and out of that come a lot of money, like support for, I guess we were supported as a risk group, the Aboriginal LGBTI community, but it did get us together, like things like Anukana and World AIDS conferences, and just a lot of the funding, has sort of dried up from that. So we're looking for other things, and it's just really interesting to look back on that time. And
absolutely, and some of the artists that were Indigenous artists that created the imagery that was used on so many of those posters and the photographs as well, so they're a fantastic, I guess, time capsule as well, to that time, in terms of an actual poster and the imagery that was used.
And there was some great, I mean, I saw a video that was directed by Tracy Moffat, you know, for the Redfern Aboriginal Medical Service. Bronwyn Bancroft did that series of posters. As an artist as well, you know, it was time. There were some really classics, and it's really good to see them in the collection.
Yeah. Did you did any of your imagery was used back then? Were you creating artworks back then, or?
I did some stuff for Kirkton Road Centre in King's Cross in Sydney. So I lived in Sydney in the 90s and stuff like that. So I came here in the early 2000s. And people are familiar on those posters, and you know, so and the posters are really familiar to me. It's really good to see. Like, it's a great collection. How do you sort of engage the underrepresented communities? Like, where does in terms of the archives, and do you have examples from other queer archives in other countries that have tried to engage underrepresented communities as well?
Yeah, so in terms of our sort of outreach, I guess, as you call it, in that instance, is that we're very community focused, and that's what we're enjoying, looking forward to at the Pride Centre, in that we can work with all the communities who are going to be in the building. But in terms of a lot of our programming, you know, we try to have presence at all our major sort of queer events over the year, Midsummer, Pride. We do some history walks. So we're always engaging at that community level. Also, what we've sort of, you could almost align our archives to with other archives around the world that started at that similar time. So the Canadian Gay and Lesbian Archives, they changed their name to the Archives, using the Q, and they started in the 1970s. And the instigator of the Australian Queer Archives, Graham Carberry, he also visited the Canadian Archives in the 70s to get an idea of how to sort of start up. So there, in the last few years, they've been really concentrating on they call themselves the Archives, and they feature the work of LGBTQ2+. So they look at that, also capturing the two spirits of people. Yeah. So they're going through a good overview of their whole organisation and collection in relation to inclusion. And so, you know, they're sort of a leader in that space as well. So they're probably an collecting archive that we'd look to in terms of what they're doing in that space, because I see it as really respectful. So, so our organisation is wanting to also lead in that space. We, of course, are under-resourced significantly in terms of staffing, so we rely heavily on volunteers, but we'll get there.
It's a very community-based archive, isn't it? You know, and it runs on the smell of an oily rag. It is under-resourced.
Look, we have a fantastic lot of supporters and members who really donate and leave bequests to us. So we're very thankful of that, you know, because they sort of enable us to be sustainable and keep going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, great. I was going to ask you, so how does your queer archives work with other collections, you know? So, you know, there's an exhibition coming up at NGV called Queer, where they're looking at their collection through a queer lens, and I wondered how you might work with another institution, or, you know, the State Library, where we've been involved in looking at archives in a project. Yeah,
that's right. So we loan a lot of our material to some of the other organisations that need to tell more of that queer history. So we've loaned material to, you know, Sydney Art Gallery and Sydney Museum and other such institutions around Australia, really. So that's important to us as well. But also we work with them collegiately, other collections, in terms of sharing. If we've found that we might have lots of duplicates of things and other institutions might be missing, say, copies of magazines like Outrage or things like that, we will donate if we've got spare, things like that, that just help people build up their collections. We've also worked collaboratively with other organisations to highlight queer life. So the example being that recent project with Heritage Victoria, in terms of looking at the significance of places and objects across Victoria. So, yeah, we're always open to collaboration and partnership, I think, which is what we're particularly interested in, as well as sharing our material wherever we can. So in terms of queer at NGV, we're really looking forward to seeing, being able to go to the big house of NGV and just feel like we can really indulge ourselves in enjoying that exhibition.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it as well.
Yeah.
So people donate to the archives. How? And I guess, it's really important to work in archives and queering other collections, or working on projects.
Yeah. Even just like we've worked on projects before where looking into those bigger mainstream collections to try and find the queer content, or to find the personal queer stories that reflect our lives. And sometimes you have to really do a deep dive. You can't find it. You have to, so much of our histories is often caught up in court records and police records and that sort of thing. So the State Library, I mean, you worked with that collection just to create a piece for that exhibition we did at the State Library, We Are Here. And what was that? The Natives Rallied for Love.
The Natives Rallied for Love, which was my response to, that area being a sort of sacred place where we did a lot of protesting, and a lot of Aboriginal protests start from there too, in front of that State Library. So, I was thinking about that becoming a meeting place, and out of that archive. I represented my favorite things that didn't go and stuff like that, but old archive images of Australian animals, and put them in this.
What was fantastic about that project too is that they acquired that work into the collection of the State Library. So that's fantastic. That
was really fantastic
start. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Now, how do people access the archives? And you've been talking about where you're located, but maybe one more reminder for people that you're actually in the Victorian Pride Centre now.
We are. So we are a tenant of the Pride Centre. So we are hoping to open up. We're just getting all our COVID ticks in place, probably towards the end of this month. And it will be appointment only, but then we're really looking to try and create a space where we will have some drop-in times. So we are at the moment have display cases in our space with material on display. And also there's books that people can just sort of, peruse just like a library. So that's what we're really wanting to eventually be in that space. So as well as being by appointment for academics and researchers and groups, start to be a place, and mob, and so that people can pop in and feel comfortable with that. So
that'd be really, I think, it sounds like it would be lovely just for a place for intergenerational conversation, and that they're always really important to me as well. I think, we learn a lot, and in that reciprocity of young and older, and the history of our movement, stuff like that.
Because sometimes those connections they might start off really informally, and then it's also, you just want to be able to be respectful, and provide, like, I think all of the Pride Centre and other organisations just want to be able to provide those safe places. And, you know, someone said to me the other day about, you know, post-marriage equality, you know, it's all pretty good now. And I sort of said that, yeah, but you can never be too complacent. You can never be too complacent. So I think that's what our collection is very good at showing, is that there's a real history to the struggle, and it's important to acknowledge that.
Have you got any shirts about blackfellas for marriage equality?
We've got a photo of one. We don't have an actual shirt.
Tasha, who is co-founder of that movement, said she will donate some. So,
that's great.
That's the other thing. Like, if any mob out there want to donate stuff, do they just contact the archives? Or?
Absolutely, or they can do it through you, or you know, whatever. That's fantastic. Yeah, we've only got a photo of that T-shirt, which we usually have up in our space as well. So
no, I can get you some of the T-shirts, which is great.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
The other thing is, how do people book? You know, I know we're under COVID rules and the Pride Centre is just opening up. How do they?
Yeah, they can just
maybe have a look at how do you go about it? You know, if I wanted to come in and have a look at the collection. Yeah.
So you can just send us an email. So our and that information is all via our website, or mail@queerarchives.org.au. And then we're usually open. We will start opening a couple of days or 2 half days a week, and then 2 nights a week. So that's a time when people can come in as well. And we're happy to take more than one person at a time if you want to come with a friend, or, you know, organise a group visit, things like that. Yeah, we can most likely accommodate that depending on numbers. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to say before we go? Or
look, I think
I've sort of run out of questions, but
I know, but I mean, you've visited the archives, you know.
I have, and they were in Thorn Harbour for a while, where I was, you know, when we were at St Kilda Road. So my possum skin cloak lived there for a little while as well.
It did, and we were very happy to see it now in its beautiful new case in the Pride Centre. But I feel like I looked after that cloak for a few years in between.
And it moved around, and it got a few showings, so it was good for that. And I guess, you know, we've worked together we are here at the State Library. That was a project where we accessed the archives of the State Library. Yeah. I guess I've worked at Ballarat Gallery as well, looking at their archive of
that's right.
colonial prints.
Was that with the Megan Evans when you did that?
Squatters and Savages. Yeah. So that was, they just, so, and I think more and more artists are looking at archives, and, you know, it is our history as well. So,
and you're going to have that piece in the Queer NGV exhibition.
Yes,
that's exciting.
But this isn't about me. It's about you, Ed.
Oh, sorry. No, totally. And you know, there's other galleries around that do fantastic exhibitions that we both know of, like Black Dot, and you know, always partake of Midsummer and that sort of thing. So looking forward to being able to go to a gallery again.
Yeah, me too. There's so all right, well, thanks for today. Thanks for taking some time to tell us about the archives, and and just mob out there, if you want to access the archives, it's there, and you can have a look at what's in the collection. You would have seen some of them today, just some of the pictures flash by. So, but there's notes, there's a whole range of stuff that you collect, and always on the lookout for new material.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if
Yeah.
we want to be in there, we need to be represented as well. You know, our stories really need to be represented.
Yeah, and look,
Yeah.
if you need, happy to talk to anyone at any time more about what we do or how best to engage with the collection as well. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Peter.
I will see everyone very soon. I don't know when this is going to show, probably in a week or so. So on our YouTube channel. But yeah, until then, see you later, Ange.
Right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.